In today's video, I will discuss the First Great Awakening, an event in the history of the American colonies that led to a revival in Christianity. First, we should talk about the causes. The Enlightenment, a movement which encouraged science and logic but discouraged religion, had reached the Americas. Church attendance became less common, Christians grew disappointed in the world, and many began to crave a return in religious piety. During this time, the British colonies in America were religiously divided. New England was mostly made up of congregational churches. The middle colonies had Quakers, Anglicans, Lutherans, Baptists, Presbyterians, the Dutch Reformed, and even Catholics. The southern colonies were mostly Anglican, but had many who were Lutherans and Quakers and Anglicans. I already said Anglican, but in the late 1720s, a revival began to take root as preachers began re-emphasizing Calvinist beliefs. Now we should talk about some of the individuals of the Great Awakening. One of the fathers of the Great Awakening and one of the most celebrated Protestants in American history is that of Jonathan Edwards. His message centered around the idea that humans were sinners and God is an angry judge and people must ask for forgiveness. One of his most well-known sermons is Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, which he gave with such emotion and passion that word of his sermon spread throughout the colonies. That passion was one of his most well-known traits, which he used to move those who listened, converting hundreds and documenting them in narratives of surprising conversions. Another impactful character of the Great Awakening is George Whitefield, or Whitefield, a British minister. Unlike Jonathan Edwards, he traveled throughout the colonies to give his sermons. In 1 year, he covered 5,000 miles and gave over 350 sermons. He was extremely expressive, often shouting and trembling while he preached. George Whitefield preached to almost anyone, from commoners to slaves to Native Americans. It was difficult to evade him. Even Benjamin Franklin, who was skeptic of religion, listened intently to Whitefield's sermons, the two even becoming close friends. Other pastors during the Great Awakening included David Brainerd, who I believe I'm pronouncing that right, David Brainerd, who led mission trips to indigenous Americans, Samuel Davies, I believe it's pronounced that way, it's Davies, who preached to slaves of spiritual equality, Theodorus Jacobus Frelinghuysen, who preached to Dutch settlers, Gilbert Tennant, and many others. It is the works of these men that led to a revival in the Christian faith in the Americas. Now we should talk about themes of the Great Awakening. There were many major themes in the Great Awakening that were preached by multiple pastors. These are, all people are born sinners. Sin without salvation leads to hell. All people can be saved if they confess their sins to God, seek forgiveness, and accept God's grace. All people can have an emotional connection with God. Religion should not be formal but casual and personal. Now we should talk about the criticizers because, well, with beliefs like this, there's going to be a large amount of criticism. So with such an influential movement, there was a ton of criticism. One of the most famous criticizers of the Great Awakening was Charles Chauncy, a Boston minister. He supported a more traditional and formal take on religion, which was preached against during the Great Awakening. By 1742, many clergymen in New England had split into groups because of constant debate. Those who followed these new ideas were known as New Lights, while those who were followers of the more traditional ideas were known as Old Lights. Because of the Great Awakening, ordinary people were encouraged to have a more personal connection with God without ministers. New denominations sprang forth, such as the Methodist and Baptist churches, which grew rapidly. Although it unified the colonies more than before, many also agreed it divided the colonies between those who disagreed with its teachings and those who followed those teachings. Most historians claim that the Great Awakening influenced the Revolutionary War by encouraging nationalism and individualism. The Great Awakening also led to the establishment of Princeton, Rutgers, Brown, and Dartmouth universities. The Great Awakening undoubtedly had a large impact on the American colonies. Religion was on a steady decline, but was reinvigorated by the Great Awakening. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed, subscribe for more and turn on the notifications for when my next video comes out. Goodbye.